buried there. A bunch of early Mozartian singers who sang principal parts in the premiere of Mozart operas are buried there. So it's a pretty cool place. Salieri is not there, no. Salieri was never buried here. Several of Mozart's children who died early are buried here, and they're in unmarked graves. Salieri is in the Central Cemetery, which is a little further down here, and I would never recommend going there. It's just so, well, never mind. It's too uncomfortable, that place. It's too fake and staged, at least for my sensibilities. So this is Vienna. Schubert is up around in this area when he was growing up, right? Beethoven lived over around in here, and there's the Schwarzspan. You see the black spaniel street where Beethoven died. Here's where Sigmund Freud had most of his practice. Right? I mean, all of this is connected in Vienna in this really concentrated kind of way. Definitely go there when you get the chance. And when you do, it's this area down in here that's really, really cool. This is the area right here where Schubert went to school. And Robert Schumann lived on this street over here. That area is just really fun to hang around in. So anyway, when you go to Vienna, let me know, and I'll make sure you know how to get there and where everything is. So you get the feeling for St. Mark's Cemetery. All right, so far so good? Now, when Mozart is taken here, the next thing we want to deal with is the type of burial. You've seen the movie Amadeus, so you know, you've all seen it, right at the end? You know, he's taken in you've never seen it. Well, I won't be ruining it for it. It is an affecting movie. I know I've seen that movie, I don't even want to tell you how many times. I saw that movie, I think, 10 times in the cinema. I was so taken by it when I saw it. I thought it was so beautiful and so musically well done. I just kept going. I couldn't stop. I've never been to a movie like that. I was an undergraduate when that movie came out. How do you like that? Try that one on for size. Yeah, I was an undergraduate, and I was studying with someone who was a Salieri scholar. I was so pissed, you know. I mean, like, here we go again. You know, more of this, right? Very entertaining. All right, so anyway, the movie portrays Mozart's death, his burial, as being sort of dumped out of a casket that has a fake end. So the casket is just tilted, and it's got like a swinging end pin, and the corpse just comes flying out of the casket and into a common grave, and they toss some lime on him, and away they go and leave it exposed. Again, we don't know 100% of what happened. But people have done a great deal of research on this, and some of it is rather recent research, even into the 1990s when the centennial of Mozart's birth came about. There was a great deal of research that was done. And the latest thinking is that we know that he was given a third-class burial, which is not a pauper's burial. So the first thing is the idea that he was treated like a common, pauper or criminal or something like that is false. All right? It was respectable, and most people who died had a third-class burial. It cost you a lot more money to get to second class, and you didn't really get a whole lot more. All you got was a little bit more pomp and circumstance. You'd have, you'd pay people to walk and accompany the casket, a bunch of other stuff, but it would be the same basic deal. First class was a whole lot of money, and first class you could, in fact, hang a marker on a wall, not a headstone the way we conceive of it, but a marker on a wall somewhere that would memorialize who you were and what your dates were and stuff like that. And you still see those in Salzburg and stuff like that. And in smaller towns, too, in both Germany and Austria, you see that. That was a common convention. So like most people, Mozart was buried third class. Baron von Swieten paid for his funeral. And Baron von Swieten paid for a number of other expenses, even though he had just gotten fired. But remember, Baron von Swieten was someone who was a good friend of Mozart when he was alive, and was one of the people who shared his love of Bach with Mozart. So Baron von Swieten is a really good guy in all of this. He was very helpful. And I think that they could have gotten the money together to do second class or even first class had they wanted to, but it just doesn't seem consistent with the way Mozart looked at things. The latest thinking on this is that there is a different interpretation of the three German words that are used to describe Mozart's grave. This is the phrase that's used to describe Mozart's burial, his grave. Allgemeines. Second word, Einfachches. Third word, Grab. Allgemeines einfaches Grab. Right? Allgemeines einfaches Grab. And the term here, allgemeine, is what is important. That is a word in German which frequently means common. But in this instance, it also can mean general. And it's the meaning general that they believe that it actually referred to, so that his burial would have been by himself in a general grave, not a common grave, as was generally believed that this phrase would have meant. So it's the word allgemeines which is debated, and modern scholars now believe that it would have been a typical grave, not a common grave. So typical would have meant by himself. And so that, again, is different from the movie, and it's different from the mythology. The mythology is that nobody cared for him when he was alive, and nobody cared about him in death, and therefore his music is more spiritual or more special because of this kind of thing. We as human beings are flawed and we make bad decisions, all of which is true. But in this instance, I think there's a mythology that we want to believe that makes his death more dramatic. All right. Now, he was buried in, we think at this moment, the latest thinking is that it is an individual grave, but the practice of the time was that you were not buried in a coffin. And the practice of the time was that when you were buried in this individual grave, they put limestone in sort of powdered format over your body, which would accelerate decomposition. They cover you up, you got about 10 years down there, and then they need to turn the grave over. This is not what we're used to. Okay, this is the part that makes us uncomfortable. But that's what they did.
So do we re-dig the body up?
Then they dig out the bones, stack the bones somewhere in a huge pit or wherever, because you're now gone. All you got left's bones, and they're anonymous. Boom, on with the next. Because that way we can reuse that, that land, and it stays fairly soft. It doesn't get completely packed down, so you can still dig it up and stuff like that. So that's the practice. Again, part of the reason you don't do that is that it's really not a very sanitary thing to do. So we've changed that. But remember, Joseph II was one of the people that created new decrees for burials that took place in the 1780s and forward, which took people out of the churches and into these suburban cemeteries, because it's much more sanitary to bury people away from where everybody's eating and drinking and all of that. It just makes more sense. It's healthier. The Stephansdom to this day has a huge, giant collection of bones in its basement. Right? I mean, some of them are stacked like cordwood. Some of them are just all in these pits. It's very disturbing. But the reality was, for 1,000 years, that's the way people were buried. They just tossed the bodies into the crypts, and they would decompose, and then you'd have the bones, and the bones would, if you had criminals, you could make them stack the bones, and, very, very medieval kind of, right? And not healthy, clearly not healthy, and not, but again, they didn't know this right away. They didn't know that this was what it was about. Fuchs, our writer of our Counterpoint book, is allegedly buried somewhere in the Stephenstone, one of these huge places. It's been forgotten, right? So his bones are in the church, right? Fascinating stuff. So that part of it's different. Now, it was not typical. Constanzi is viewed sometimes in a negative light because she did not